I shouldn't have been that close to her. Not in that quiet kitchen, not at that hour, with the air thick like it was holding its breath. But I was. Close enough to see the faint line of laughter that time had left near her lips. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating off her skin, even before her hand brushed mine across the counter. Her hand barely touched me. A slip, maybe, or maybe not, and yet my pulse stuttered like I'd been caught doing something forbidden. She didn't pull back quickly. She lingered, just long enough for me to wonder if the touch had been deliberate. She was older, sure. Mid-40s, graceful in a way you can't fake, every gesture measured, every silence louder than words. She carried herself like someone who knew the rules by heart, and knew how to hide behind them. But there was something else in her eyes when she finally looked at me, a hesitation, a flicker that betrayed the confidence she wore like a coat. Vulnerability, maybe. Or danger. I couldn't stop staring. "You're too quiet," she said finally, her voice soft, almost teasing, though her fingers tightened slightly around the mug she was holding. "I talk too much when I don't mean it," I said. "With you. I'd rather get it right." Her mouth curved, not quite a smile, not quite approval. More like she was testing the weight of my words. She leaned an elbow against the counter, so close the sleeve of her blouse brushed my arm. "You're making me break all my rules," she murmured, almost like she hadn't meant to say it out loud. The words hung between us, heavier than they should have been. I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, something warm, not floral, something that stayed low in the chest. I couldn't think straight. "Then let's make new ones," I answered, my voice steadier than I felt. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a second the room was too small for both of us. There was no sound but the hum of the refrigerator, and the shallow rhythm of our breathing. She didn't laugh. She didn't tell me I was ridiculous. Instead, she looked at me the way someone looks when they've already made the choice they swore they wouldn't. The silence stretched, her gaze steady, mine too stubborn to look away. She shifted slightly, the faintest move, but it was enough for her shoulder to press against my chest, for the curve of her hip to brush the edge of my hand on the counter. My fingers twitched, almost reaching for her, almost daring, but I held still. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Her lips parted, like she was about to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she set her mug down, slow, deliberate, and turned her face just enough that I caught the shine of her eyes in the dim light. I thought she'd step back. Instead, she leaned in barely, close enough that I felt the whisper of her hair against my jaw. My breath caught. Her hand hovered near mine again, this time not by accident. And just when I thought she would close the distance, when the tension finally snapped into something neither of us could take back, the sound of the door unlocking split the moment in half. She froze. I did too. Her eyes cut to mine, wide now, panic stitched into the corners. My chest tightened. Neither of us moved. The click of the door handle turned the silence into something sharp, unbearable. And then, before I could say anything, she whispered, "Not now." The door had closed again. Whoever it was, they'd only dropped something off in the hall. But the spell had already cracked. She'd stepped back, straightened her blouse, wrapped herself in that careful composure I was beginning to recognize as her armor. I leaned against the counter, pretending to be calm. My heart hadn't slowed. She spoke first. "You should go," she said softly, though her voice lacked conviction. I should have listened. But I stayed. "You always do that," I said. Her brows knit. "Do what?" "Pull away the second it feels real." The line landed heavier than I meant it to, and for a long moment she didn't answer. Instead, she crossed her arms, gaze fixed on some point past my shoulder. I thought she'd ignore me, but then she surprised me. "You're not the first man to notice me," she said carefully. "But the last one who did left me with nothing I wanted to remember." The admission was quiet, almost lost in the hum of the fridge. She didn't look at me, but her fingers worried at the edge of her sleeve, betraying what her face tried to hide. I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. I knew that look, the one that said the past was still sitting too close. Instead, I offered a sliver of my own truth. Most of the girls my age, it's like talking to an echo. You say something, they bounce it back. Nothing sticks. But you… I stopped, embarrassed at how raw it sounded. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, curious. But me? You make me forget how young I am, I said, quieter now. The air between us shifted again, heavier, more dangerous. She stepped closer, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough that I could. The faint scent of her perfume threaded with the warmth of her skin. My chest tightened. You don't understand what you're asking for, she whispered. Then explain it, I murmured. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Instead of answering, she reached past me for a dish towel, her arm brushing my shoulder as she did. It was nothing, a passing touch. But the heat of it stayed long after her hand moved away. I pretended to adjust the towel, fingers grazing hers longer than necessary. She didn't move immediately. For a second, her hand rested under mine unmoving, like she was daring herself not to flinch. Then she pulled back, slow enough that it wasn't rejection, more like surrender to her own hesitation. The silence stretched again, filled only by the sound of water dripping from the faucet. Finally, she turned to face me, her voice steadier than her hands. You're dangerous, she said. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I held her gaze, let her see I wasn't backing away. And when she reached out, almost absently, and let her fingers graze the back of my wrist, just once, just enough to burn, I knew she'd given me more than words. The touch lasted a heartbeat. Maybe two. But it said everything. The next time it happened, it wasn't planned. She was in the living room, curled up with a book, the lamplight painting her hair in warm tones. I told myself I'd only stop by to return something I'd borrowed. Nothing more. But the moment she looked up, eyes soft, guarded but lit with that flicker I couldn't stop chasing, I knew I'd lied to myself. You should be careful showing up unannounced, she murmured, setting the book aside. People might get the wrong idea. Would they be wrong? I asked before I could stop myself. Her breath caught. I heard it. She didn't answer. Instead, she gestured toward the chair across from her. I sat, but too close. I could feel it, the charge humming between us like a live wire. Her phone buzzed on the table. A name lit up the screen, one I didn't recognize. She snatched it up quickly, pressed decline. Too quickly. You don't have to hide things from me, I said softly. Her lips pressed together. Some things are better hidden. I wanted to push, but the tremor in her voice kept me still. The silence stretched. She leaned forward slightly, her hand brushing her knee, not mine, but close enough that the space between us felt deliberate. And then, footsteps. The rattle of a key in the lock. My pulse spiked. She froze, color draining from her face. I half rose, but she was faster, pressing a hand against my chest, firm, desperate, pushing me back down into the chair. Stay, she whispered. Her palm lingered too long before she pulled away. The door opened, then closed. A voice called from the hall, a neighbor, asking if she had a spare light bulb. Relief, sharp and fleeting, crossed her face. She went to the door, her posture carefully casual. I stayed silent, heart slamming in my chest. Minutes later, she returned, closing the door with a shaky exhale. This is exactly what I meant, she said, her voice low, almost scolding, though her hands trembled slightly. I stood, moving closer without thinking. What do you mean? That we shouldn't be alone? Or that you don't trust yourself when we are? Her eyes snapped to mine. Too sharp. Too raw. You're too young, she whispered. Then stop looking at me like that, I said. She faltered. Her gaze dropped to my mouth, just for a second, but it was enough. My body leaned in before my mind caught up. The air tightened, breath mingling, hearts pounding in unison. Her hand lifted, fingers brushing the side of my jaw, feather-light. I nearly broke then, nearly closed the inch between us, but she pulled back, her touch vanishing like smoke. The silence roared. Neither of us moved. And then, almost against her own will, she stepped into me instead of away. Close enough that our foreheads nearly touched, close enough that her breath warmed my lips. "Don't," she whispered, but her body didn't move back. I don't remember how I ended up so close to her. One moment we were standing apart, the next her back was nearly against the wall, my shadow cast over hers in the low light. Neither of us had meant for it to happen, or maybe we had, in every unspoken way. Her arms were crossed, but it wasn't defense. It was restraint. Her breath came uneven, and I could feel the tension radiating from her skin, the kind that begged to be touched but dared me not to. "This has to stop," she whispered. The words sounded rehearsed, but her voice shook on the last syllable. I leaned in, close enough that she could hear the strain in my own breath. "Then tell me you don't think about it. Tell me I'm imagining the way you look at me." Her eyes flickered, caught. She didn't answer. My hand rose before I could think better of it. I brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, fingers grazing the warm edge of her cheek. She closed her eyes at the touch, just for a second, then opened them again, gaze burning straight through me. "You don't understand what this would cost me," she said, voice low, almost breaking. "Then let me carry some of it," I whispered back. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but no sound came. Instead, she pressed a palm against my chest, not to push me away, just to feel the space, to measure the distance she wasn't ready to erase. My heart hammered against her hand, too loud, too obvious. "People will talk," she said softer now. "They'll call it wrong." I swallowed. "Let them." Her hand trembled against me, and before I could stop myself, I covered it with mine. Her fingers curled into my palm as though they'd been waiting for it. "You make it sound so simple," she murmured. "It feels simple when you're this close," I said. Her breath caught. She leaned the slightest bit into me, her forehead brushing my shoulder, her weight featherlight but undeniable. I lowered my head, lips near her ear, and the words slipped out before I could stop them. "I can't stop wanting you." Her whole body stilled, then shivered against mine. For a long moment, the world shrank to nothing but her breathing, her warmth, the fragile way she clung to silence like it was her last shield. And then she lifted her face. Inches away. Her gaze dropped to my mouth, then back to my eyes. I tilted closer, every nerve alive with the risk, the inevitability. Her lips parted, and a sharp knock rattled the door. We both froze. The sound came again, louder. Someone calling her name from the other side. Her eyes widened. My chest heaved. Neither of us moved, breathless, trapped between the kiss we hadn't taken and the interruption we couldn't ignore. The knock on the door didn't stop. 3 times. Then silence. Then a voice, low, male, too familiar. "Are you in there?" Her entire body went rigid. My stomach dropped. Whoever it was, she knew him. She pressed a finger to her lips, eyes wide, then stepped away from me so quickly it hurt. The warmth of her hand, her body, vanished like it had never been there. I'll call you tomorrow," she called back, her voice sharp, rehearsed. The pause that followed was brutal. Then footsteps retreated down the hall. A door shut. Silence returned, heavy and accusing. She turned back to me, but wouldn't meet my eyes. Her hands shook as she smoothed her blouse. "You need to leave." "Who was that?" My voice came out rougher than I meant. "No one," she snapped, too fast, too defensive. The lie hung between us, obvious, ugly. I stepped closer, but she moved past me, brushing against my shoulder in a way that sent sparks straight through my chest. The contact was accidental, but my body reacted as if it were deliberate. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't look at me like that." I couldn't stop. "Then tell me the truth." She finally met my gaze, and what I saw there shook me. Fear, yes, but also something darker, heavier. Guilt. "It was my ex," she admitted finally, voice low. "He still checks in. Still, thinks there's something to come back to." The words landed like a blow. My chest tightened, not with jealousy exactly, but with the sudden awareness that this wasn't just us in some secret bubble. The world pressed in, ex-lovers, history, eyes that might see. Does he know about me? I asked. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. There is no you to know about. That cut deeper than it should have. I flinched, and she noticed. Her face softened, but too late. I didn't mean it like, she began. But I was already shaking my head. You did. For a moment neither of us spoke. She pressed a hand to her temple, like the weight of it all was finally too much. And then, softer, trembling. You don't understand. If he knew, if anyone knew, it would ruin everything I've built. My work. My family. My... She broke off, biting her lip. I moved before I could stop myself. My hand found her wrist, gently, grounding her. Then let it ruin me instead, I said. Her breath caught. She swayed, almost leaning into me, then stopped herself. The pulse beneath my fingers beat like a trapped bird. Don't say that, she whispered. But she didn't pull away. Not this time. We stood there, locked in that fragile, dangerous closeness, knowing the truth had just raised the stakes higher than either of us had imagined. And yet, as her fingers finally threaded through mine, hesitant but deliberate, I knew the choice had already been made. The air between us was too heavy to breathe. Her hand in mine was small but burning, the tremor in her fingers betraying everything her words tried to deny. Say it, I whispered. My voice felt raw, stripped down to the bone. She shook her head, eyes closing for a moment, like if she didn't look at me, she could still pretend there was distance. But there wasn't. Not anymore. You want me? I said, not as a question but as a truth I couldn't keep buried. Her eyes flew open. She stepped forward, almost in defiance of herself. My back brushed the wall. She was close enough now that I felt the heat of her body before it touched mine. Close enough that her perfume, faint and warm, curled into my lungs like smoke I couldn't exhale. This is madness, she whispered. But her hand slid up my arm, fingertips tracing the fabric of my sleeve, slow and deliberate. Then let it be, I murmured. Her breath hitched. Her lips parted inches from mine. The hesitation in her gaze warred with the hunger there, and for a heartbeat, I thought she'd pull away again. But instead, she leaned her forehead against mine, her exhale trembling against my mouth. I've spent years building walls, she said. And you, her voice broke. You walk right through them like they were never there. I cupped her cheek, the softness of her skin grounding me. Then stop rebuilding them. Silence. The kind that said more than language ever could. Her eyes darted to my lips, then back. My pulse thundered against her palm where it still rested on my chest. And then, finally, she closed the distance. Her lips met mine with a force that was both hesitant and desperate, like she'd spent half her life denying the possibility. I kissed her back, not careful, not calculated, but raw, human, messy. Her hands slid into my hair, pulling me closer, as though she'd been starving for this and only just allowed herself to taste it. When we broke apart, she kept her forehead against mine, her breathing ragged. This doesn't make sense, she whispered. I smiled faintly, my thumb brushing her lower lip. It doesn't have to. Her laugh was shaky, almost a sob, but real. She leaned into me fully now, no hesitation, no armor. For the first time, she wasn't retreating. I can't undo this, she said, the words trembling but certain. You don't have to, I answered. Her eyes softened, a kind of surrender settling into her expression. And in that moment, in the closeness of her body against mine, in the heat and the silence that no longer felt suffocating but safe, I knew. We weren't guessing anymore. We weren't circling what-ifs. We understood each other completely. The kiss had changed everything, but not in the way I feared. She hadn't pushed me away. She hadn't wrapped herself back in excuses. She was still here, still close, her breath warm against my neck as if she was finally letting herself exist in this moment instead of running from it. I didn't speak right away. Neither did she. The silence wasn't sharp anymore. It was softer, steady, like the quiet that comes after a storm. Her fingers were still tangled with mine. She noticed, looked down at the way our hands fit together, and shook her head faintly, not in refusal, but disbelief. "This shouldn't feel so easy," she whispered. "Then maybe it's not supposed to be hard," I said. Her laugh was low, unsteady, but genuine this time. She leaned against me, her head resting lightly on my shoulder. I felt the weight of her, solid, real, and something inside me finally eased. For a long time, we didn't move. Just sat there, breathing in the same rhythm, letting the tension dissolve into something gentler. She traced idle patterns against my palm with her thumb, and the simple intimacy of it nearly undid me. "You scare me," she admitted finally, her voice so quiet I almost missed it. "Why?" "Because you make me want things I told myself I was done wanting." I turned, brushing a strand of hair from her face, letting my knuckles linger against her cheek. "And you make me feel older than I am. In the best way." She smiled at that, soft and wistful, then pressed her forehead against mine. Her eyes closed, her breath slowing. For the first time, I saw her without the walls, without the rules. Just her. The doubts were still there, of course. The age gap, the whispers, the what-ifs. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was the way she held on to me like she was finally done letting go. I kissed her forehead gently, a promise without words. She exhaled, leaning into the touch, and when she opened her eyes, there was no hesitation left. "So what now?" she asked. "No," I said, lacing my fingers tighter around hers. "We stop pretending." She laughed again, warmer this time, brighter. She shifted closer, curling into me, her head tucked under my chin. And I wrapped my arms around her, holding her as though she'd been mine all along. No grand speeches. No perfect endings. Just two people sitting close together, finally choosing not to run from what was always there. And for the first time, it felt simple.